This is our funding, what we call funding chain. Each column here represents a phase in your career, and it starts with the student phase, where you could have a position in a DFG project as a student assistant or in a research training group. Then you have the doctoral phase, where you could also still work in a DFG project, have a position in a DFG funded project, position or fellowship in a research training group. Then there's a postdoc period, which is, I think, most interesting for you, where you would be able to apply for your own. For the first time, you could apply on your own for funding from DFG. You could also stay in a project or still work in a project on a position in a DFG project, but you also could start to apply your own funding. And the ways you could do that is basically the temporary position for principal investigators. I will come to that later. Research fellowships are fellowships that would go abroad, so that would be interesting if you are in Germany and would like to stay abroad. That would be the instrument then to take. Then we have later the phase that comes after it, where you could also, after a couple of years of postdoc experience, you could apply, or you could become eligible to apply for the Eminota program, which is our excellence program for young researchers or early career researchers, which is highly competitive. There you could apply for a junior research group, and the aim of that program would be to qualify the applicants to get a senior position, senior research position, or a professorship. Then we have the Eisenberg Program with the same objective, which I'm not going to talk about today. And then the idea is that in the end there should be a research position or a professorship. I will concentrate on the temporary position for principal investigators today, which would fit in the phase after the PhD is completed. It would be directly afterwards. The instrument, temporary position, is actually an instrument, but it's not a program in itself. It is rather a module in another program, which is called research grants, and therefore I'd like to present you that. The research grant is actually our standard project funding instrument, where you could, as I said, we are a bottom-up organization. You could come up with any idea you have. If it's good, you just write a proposal and submit it. You could. It's rather focused on basic research, as DFG in total is focused on basic research. But of course, I mean, the borders between basic research and applied research, they are blurring. So there are also cases where we fund a research project in applied research. If you're unsure, you just give us a call and we will check out whether this is still in the focus of what DFG is funding. But mostly it is. But there is a focus on basic research. There are no deadlines. This means you can apply throughout the year at any time. And the duration you could apply for is normally up to 3 years. You could also apply for less, but the maximum is 3 years. But then you could apply for an extension for prolongation of your project. This would mean you have to apply another time, but of course the second time you have higher success rates and better chances to get through with your proposal. You could ask for everything that comes on top of what the infrastructure is providing for you at the university. Everything you need on top, everything you need additionally, instrumentation, travel costs, consumables, and also you could apply for funding, for staff funding like doctoral students, student assistants position, but also you could apply for postdoc positions. There's one catch though, and that is the eligibility. You have to be a researcher, of course. You have to have your PhD completed, that's sure. But you also have to have a position. That is the normal way of DFG funding, that people who have already a position at a university or a non-university organization, that depends, applies with the proposal and applies for additional funding to conduct a project. So that is, of course, the catch. But there's good news, and this is the temporary position. If you don't have a position, you can apply for one. And that would mean that within the research grant scheme, you would just apply for another module within the grants, within the program, and that would be the module temporary position for principal investigators, which is an extra module. So if you don't have a position, you just apply for one. The position is E13 to E14. I think you know what that is. Miriam mentioned it earlier. This is actually salary categories in our salary agreement in the public sector employment. What comes out of it really much depends on where you work, whether you're married and whether you have children, etc. But these are categories of salary, and that would be what you could apply for, what DFG would pay for. The project would have to be in Germany at a German research institution. The host institution would become the employer, so you would not be employed by the DFG. DFG would just give the funds for it, but they would give the funds at the institution, of course, to the institution, and they would then employ you. If you submit the proposal, you would have to submit with your proposal a confirmation of your host institution that it's willing to host your project. But then you could actually go to every host institution, so you're not fixed to the host institution where you are. It's an instrument which is quite flexible, I'd say. You could, as I mentioned, you could change the host institution. You could, of course, apply for a project within the University of Bonn, but you don't need to do this. I mean, you should, of course, select the host institution which fits best to the project that you are planning. This could be, of course, the University of Bonn, but it doesn't have to be. So you could change before applying. You just would need to have this confirmation letter of the host institution that they're willing to host the project. You could also start with the project and then during the runtime of the project change the host institution. That would be also possible. You could also change the position. Let's say you would start with the own position, with the temporary position, but then your university offers you a position. Then of course you could take it and still continue with the project, and the funds that are left then for the Eigenstelle, for the own position, you could transfer into a doctoral student position, for instance, and then you could hire someone in your project. You could also do both. You could change the host institution and change the position. Everything happens. That's everyday routine, what we're doing. And also you could interrupt the project if, let's say, you want to go abroad for some time, or if you want to substitute a professorship or something like that. You could interrupt the project up to 14 months. Yeah, here are some statistics on the numbers and success rates that we have. And you see in the light blue columns, they show the numbers of research grants proposals that were submitted at DFG per year that included the module temporary position. And you see they're getting more and more. And during some years, we funded less and less, so that meant that the success rate went down, but since 2013 it goes up again, so that at the moment we are on average at a success rate of around 30%. But this is really no, as you can see, this is no fixed success rate. This really is what comes out of the process. We don't say we don't say to our review boards, you can only fund 30% of the projects with the Eigenstelle. But they just really look at it and decide on the quality, and then this is what comes out in the end, 30% at the moment. The success rate, it can change, as you can see, from year to year. It can also change from subject to subject. So this is really just an orientation, around 30%. It means also that rejection is the normal case, of course. And what you see there also on the red line, this is the average success rate. And what you can see is that the average success rate is slightly higher. What you find in the average success rate is these are all proposals in all programs that run through our individual grants review procedure. And this includes research grants with and without the temporary position, fellowships, eminenta grants, COSALEC grants, Eisenberg grants, so everything is in there included. But you can see there's a slight, the chances are a bit lower than average, which might have to do with the fact that, of course, the proposals are a bit more expensive. Of course, if you apply for the Eigenstelle, then of course you have to ask for more money than if you have your own position already and just would ask for consumables and travels and maybe a student assistant. Yeah, if you then feel encouraged to apply, you would go to our ELAN portal, which is our electronic proposal submission system, where you can log in. You can, if you don't have already username and password, you register first, and I think a day later or so you get an email from us with the username and with the password, and then you can log into the system. And there is then a step-by-step procedure that leads you through the proposal and through the filling out of the proposal. The proposal itself, it consists of 3 parts basically, and this is the personal data, your personal data that you would have to type into the system. And then there's the project description, which is the actual proposal. It contains current state of research, preliminary works, objectives, your schedule, your work plan, and the budget. You will find in the ELAN portal, you will find templates that you could download, and then you would just have to fill out the headings and then upload it again. So it's actually relatively easy. Then the third thing is appendices. This would be your CV or the CV of all applicants included in the project. You can, of course, apply as a single person, but also you can apply for coordination or cooperative projects. And then if you have several PIs, several applicants, you would need a CV for each applicant. You would need to upload this CV there. And then I mentioned also the host institution letter. You would have to upload there. There's also a template available at the DFG website, and you would just download it and fill it out, and let's sign it in your institution and then upload it again. Yeah, this is actually my last slide already, which shows the peer review procedure that we apply for all proposals that include all research grants with or without the own position, the temporary position. And I'd just like to go through it very quickly, just to give you an idea what happens with your proposal once you have submitted it and it goes through the head office. If you submit the proposal via the ELAN portal, there's a submit button. Once you have collected all the information, have written your proposal, you just would push submit, and then the proposal would arrive at the head office, so to speak. And what first happens is that colleagues would check formally. So it's important that Miriam already mentioned it. You have to read the guidelines carefully, and you have to stick to them, of course. And then you should make sure that your proposal is really sticking to all rules and regulations. But if that is not the case, mistakes could happen. It's not really, you don't have to be afraid. DFG does not reject a proposal just because there's a formal mistake. But they would look at it and they would come back to you and ask you for correction or for completion. And this, of course, costs time. And it's, of course, easier to have a formally correct, to submit a formally correct proposal. That's, of course, better. So if it's checked and everything is complete and formally correct, then the head office would look for reviewers and would select reviewers. That would be the next step. And they would look for 2 reviews if you apply for more than 100,000 euros, which is normally the case when you apply for, let's say, a 3 years project. You're definitely over 100,000 euros. If it's less, then only 1 reviewer would be asked. So normally, the normal case is is 2 reviewers, and they would. We would send the proposal to these reviewers, and which are people who are experts in the field of research that you are applying in, and we would ask them to please comment on your proposal according to the criteria mentioned here, like project quality, qualifications of the applicant, work program. The question is whether it's feasible, realistic, whether the budget is realistic, and whether you choose the right working environment, the right host institution. And they would then write something about it, 2 or 3 pages normally. And this is kind of the knee line in the whole process, because it's difficult to find reviewers, and they are kind of busy people, and we have to find them, and we have to persuade them, and we have to plead them. And yeah, sometimes they don't get back to us, or they get back to us very late and say they can't make it. So this is really, it's getting more and more problematic, because also this kind of peer review, it's really, it's rising. We do more and more evaluations of this kind, and the load for peer reviewers is rising, of course. But once we have found 2 reviewers that are willing to comment on the proposal and do so, they would send back their reviews to the head office. And then the head office would write a draft recommendation. They would read the reviews, and if both reviews are positive, they would, of course, recommend to fund the proposal. If both are negative, then it would be the contrary. If one is positive and one is negative, they would have to recommend a tendency. And this whole thing then goes to the review board. The review board, these are our Fachkollegien. These are panels which exist. I think we have 48 panels of those review boards. We have a panel for each discipline. The panels consist of researchers that have been elected from the research community. Every researcher in Germany is eligible to vote. We had an election last year, and the next election will be in 2019. So please vote if you want to. And there you would vote who would sit and who would be in these review boards. And these people in this review board, they have an important task, and they are really decisive when it comes to the funding decision. They would look at several things. First, they would look at the selection of the reviewers. They would check whether the head office did choose the right ones. They could, I mean, normally they do, but this is of course a check and an assurance in the quality of the selection. If it's not the right one, or if the board thinks it's not the right one, somebody else should be heard, they would give it back to the head office, and they would have to find someone else to comment on your proposal. But normally, of course, the head office, they know what they do, and they know the reviewers they have to ask. What they do then is to check on the quality of the reviews. It's not, I mean, we don't use any review. We check them, whether they have a certain quality, whether they're fair or unfair. And the review board, the task of the review board is to judge the quality of the review and say whether it's, you know, fair or unfair, or whether it's too superficial, or whether the criticism mentioned is really fair or not fair. And then if they think everything's fine, we have the right reviewers, and they have written good reviews, then they would look at all the proposals that have been submitted during the last couple of months. I mean, the review boards, they meet 4 times a year normally. So this means all proposals that have been submitted during the last 3 months, they would look at, and they would make a ranking. They would say which of these proposals they recommend to fund and which they don't recommend to fund. So this is really an important step in the review procedure. The next step is then that it will go to that the proposal will go to the quality assurance department. That's where I work. We will look whether everything has went according to the rules. Then we have the next step, this is the joint committee, which is the committee that really decides on the project or on the proposal, and then you get the notification from the office. Yeah, this is my last slide. It shows a panel meeting. I think that's in the humanities, or I think it's art history or so. Yeah, just to give you an impression, they meet regularly in the head office like this and discuss all the proposals. Yeah, last slide. If you have questions, I think I'll stay here until the end of the coffee break. You can approach me later. I'm here at the roundtable discussion. Also later in the coffee break, you can ask everything that you have in mind, but also you find a lot of contact possibilities on our website. Maybe the easiest is if you've got questions afterwards, after the event today, just give me a call. That I think is maybe the easiest. If I can't answer, I think I can find the right one to direct you to. Thank you very much.